Are you a Disney World person who is looking to try something a little bit different? I wanted to prepare you for planning your first Disney cruise if you're interested in trading in your sneakers for flip flops. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm Shannon from WDWprepschool.com, where we spend a lot of time teaching people about Disney World trips, but we've also been talking a lot more about Disney Cruise Line in the last couple of years, and that's because Disney Cruise Line bookings are skyrocketing. A lot of Disney World people are tired of the difficulty of planning Disney World trips, in addition to being sort of nickel and dimed. People don't necessarily love having to pay for all their lightning lanes and then the rising costs of, all the different parts of a Disney World trip. And so a lot of people are like, well, let me see what I can do with the Disney cruise because that seems like it might be easier. In many ways, it is, especially if you want it to be a little less planning and to be a little bit more all-inclusive. But there is still some stuff to learn. So I wanted to take the language and the planning that you might be used to at Disney World and apply it to Disney Cruise to help you get started. So let's dive in. So for Disney World, we have a 6-step planning process to help break it down because it is an overwhelming process. And step 1 in that is to choose your dates. And then step 2 is to choose your hotel, et cetera. So I'm going to use a similar structure with Disney Cruise Line. It's going to work a little bit differently. Step 1 for Disney Cruise Line is to pick your cruise. And that is a big step because it includes so many different things that you need to consider. So when picking a cruise, you have different things that might decide it for you. One is your availability. Like, is there certain dates that you have off work or certain times that you want to go on vacation because of the school calendar, et cetera? So the dates in itself could determine that. There's also the length of the cruise because cruise lengths, I think, are like 2 to 15 nights, something like this. And most of us don't have 15 days in a row off of work. And so that'll narrow it down really quick. So the length of the cruise is going to determine which cruise you take. We do recommend usually 4 to 5 nights for a first cruise because that gives you enough time to kind of get settled and get to know the lay of the land, but it's not overly long so that it feels overwhelming if it's not your thing, you're not there for too long. But it's a good kind of happy medium. That's usually what we target for our own trips. Another is the departure port because the cruises go out of all different ports. I think I've been on Disney cruises out of maybe 5, 6 ports, something like that. And when I lived in Texas, going out of Galveston was really easy because I didn't need to book a flight, just had to drive down to the port. So that helped determine that. But most of the time, you're going to end up flying or driving to a port that is further away. But sometimes, the port is going to determine the cruise itself. There's also the itinerary because if you are interested in going to specific places, for instance, let's say you want to do a Caribbean cruise that goes to Disney's 2 private islands, then that itinerary could determine it. Thankfully, there are lots of options that go to those islands. Other ones could be you want to go to Alaska. So you're going to be going out of Vancouver in that case. There's also cruises in other countries. There's so many different itineraries, but the itinerary itself could be a determinant for you to pick your cruise. Another is the ship. The ships are all a little bit different, and some people have a lot of feelings about it, and they will choose based on the ship. The oldest ships and smallest ships are the Magic and the Wonder, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for these because they're just so easy to get to know, and I really don't have to spend much time looking around to figure out where to, head to dinner or head to a show because these small ships will make it so simple. Then the newest ships are the Wish class of ships, and these are all the same layout but different themes. And it's the Wish, the Treasure, and the Destiny, and they're all the same but just different themes, different shows. But the layout is the same. And then in between those 2 categories is the Fantasy and the Dream. And a lot of people think of the newer ships as being the biggest ones, but the Fantasy and the Dream are actually about the same size, but they have just a completely different layout than the newer ones. I think the newer ships, the Wish class of ships, are ideal for families with young kids because in my opinion, everything is kind of optimized to that group. But for adults only groups, I tend to like the other ships because they have better adults only pool areas and adults only entertainment sections that are more closed off from kids. The Wish class of ships, there's a lot of kids kind of coming through the adult spaces. So it never feels like you can really um, just have adult only time. And so that can really determine it. Each ship has different shows, different themes of dining rooms, et cetera. So that also could factor in to choosing the right ship for your first cruise. And then last but not least is budget. The cruises vary a lot in cost. I have spent as little as $800 for a cruise out of Galveston, and then around $10,000 for an Alaskan cruise. But in the middle is usually pretty typical. Like 5,000, 6,000 would be typical for a Disney cruise that we have been on. But obviously, budget always has to factor in to the equation because some cruises just cost more than others. So I would use all of these different criteria and factors to figure out your best cruise. DCL's website has a great filtering tool where you can put in a lot of this criteria that I've mentioned. You can put in the departure port, the length of the cruise, etc., and that can help narrow it down. And then from there, you can pick the best cruise for you to book. Okay, now that you have chosen the cruise that makes the most sense for you, you have to figure out your room. So, if in Disney World planning, you would choose your hotel, but for Disney Cruise, we're going to figure out which stateroom. Unlike Disney World, you actually get to pick the actual room that you're going to stay in, which is really nice because you know what your view and layout and location, everything is going to be. The room that you pick is going to vary a lot on your preferences, your budget, your travel party. Cost wise, bigger rooms are going to cost more, interior rooms are going to cost less than exterior rooms, etc. So the cost is going to be a factor, obviously. There's also different types of rooms because some are bigger, some are smaller. They have different like bed configurations. And then the location on the ship. Is it forward? Is it aft? Which is back? Is it port side? Is it starboard side? Which deck is it? Because lower decks often are less expensive than upper decks. The upper decks have better views, et cetera, et cetera. So there's different things that you can do. And when you're researching, you can actually Google the name of the ship plus a stateroom number because then you can get tips about, oh, this room was really noisy or this room is really perfect for, blah, blah, blah. And also just like the view. What does the view from that veranda look like? What are some different things to think about? So there's a lot of research that you can put into it. I will tell you that for me, what I usually do is I book deck 7 or 8, usually a veranda room, and usually midship, although not always, because midship will give you less movement when the waters are choppy. Plus, be equidistant to different elevators and amenities on board. And I like to do starboard side, not port side. Now, the reason for all of these is, well, I kind of already told you the reason for the midship is the lack of movement. Seventh or eighth deck just feels like it gives like great views, plus puts us pretty close to some of the adults only spaces that we tend to frequent. Starboard side is especially important to me during Caribbean cruises because starboard side gets panoramic views of Castaway Cay when your cruise includes Castaway Cay. But the other thing is that if you're on a cruise that has a fireworks night, which is most of the cruises, then the fireworks go off on the starboard side. Now, officially, Disney doesn't want you on your veranda watching the fireworks. I think that's for safety. But I am not so into the crowds at this phase of life. I don't know. The older I get, the more anxious I get about crowds. And so the last couple of cruises, I've actually just been in the room and watched the fireworks from the room. And that just felt like a good way to get away from the crowds and actually get to take in the entertainment. But you can't do that if you're on the port side because they are available on the starboard side. So some of this requires some trial and error, which, if it's your first cruise, you're not going to know exactly what's going to work, but hopefully that gives you a place to start. The next step in planning your Disney cruise is trying to figure out what your days are going to look like because now you've chosen the cruise and your stateroom. And now it's like, okay, what are we going to do? Now, if this was Disney World, we would be asking you to pick where you're going to be each day, like a park. But in terms of Disney Cruise, it's going to be a little bit different. Some stuff you're going to know before your cruise, and some stuff you're not going to find out until you're on your cruise itself. So before your cruise, what I recommend is joining the Facebook group for your cruise. Usually you can go into Facebook search and search for the ship name plus the dates. And there's usually a group that's already been created and you can join. And there they will often tell you like when is pirate night and when is formal night and this kind of stuff. So there's some basics that you can learn from that. Plus, you already know the overall schedule for the ship, like which days you're at sea and which days you're in ports, because that information is available when you book. So you can kind of get started in this way. There is also activities that you can book before your cruise that will fill in your schedule a little bit. Like, are you interested in going to Booty by Boutique? Because that's a thing on Disney Cruise, just like it's in the parks. Or do you want to go to a mixology class or something like that? So, some of these paid activities are not only known ahead of time, but you can book them and pay for them before your cruise. So, that's helpful. The other thing is that you're going to find out about a lot of stuff when you're on the ship. And that is mostly the free activities, things like trivia, or learning how to draw a character, movies that are showing, shows that are on the ship, that kind of thing. A lot of that stuff you're not going to know until you're on the ship. And so, what I recommend is doing some pre planning, like figuring out if you want to do mixology, Beauty by Boutique, some of those sort of paid for activities that are bookable ahead of time, as well as excursions that can be done at your different stops if you're interested in those. And then when you're on the ship and you're connected to the Wi-Fi, you can start to heart the things that sound interesting to you that you want to do. And then the DCL app kind of puts it together into a schedule, because it'll be like, okay, we already booked this activity at noon, and now you want to do trivia at 2 o'clock, and then you have this mixology at 4 o'clock. And so your plan just starts to come together. And you can do as little or as much as you want during your Disney cruise. Some people, want to pack their days, and there certainly is enough to pack your days. But you also can do very little. Grab a book and go sit in the atrium and read it, or on the deck while looking at the ocean. But the point is that you need to just start to think about what your days are going to look like. And some of that information you'll know before your cruise, and some of it you'll find out during. So a couple of activity related things to call out that I want to make sure you know about is that there are likely going to be at least one themed night during your cruise. Most cruises with Disney have a pirate night. Cruises in Alaska have a frozen night instead of a pirate night, etc. But just make sure you know that ahead of time, and that you kind of have that on your activity schedule, your daily plan. The other thing to know in terms of activities is about the live productions, because one of the reasons that people love Disney Cruise Line, including me, is the live productions. So usually for 3 nights during a cruise, there will be a stage show that is like a mini Broadway show. And I even hesitate to use the word mini sometimes, because the shows are like an hour plus. And so it kind of feels like you're at a real, like full length Broadway show almost. And the performers themselves are from Broadway a lot of times, because we sat next to these people on our last cruise and they were cheering for a specific performer very loudly. And when I asked if they knew him, they said, yes, that's our son. He's usually on Broadway, but right now he is on Disney Cruise. So the quality of the productions is very high. And so I want to make sure that you know that, because they are worth fitting into your daily plan, into your schedule. And just like with Disney World, after you make your daily plan, we recommend figuring out dining. Now, it's going to look a lot different for DCL than it does for Disney World, but we do need to think through it a little bit. So, just as an FYI, Disney cruises have usually the same or similar offerings across the ships. One of those is a large casual buffet. Usually, this is called cabanas on the older ships, and on the newer ships, it's called Marceline Market, but just a big buffet that everyone can go to, lots of seating. There are also 3 main table service restaurants for rotational dining. So if you go on a Disney cruise, you will be assigned a dining rotation of 3 different dining rooms. Let's say dining room 1, 2, and 3, and you don't know if your rotation is going to be 2, 1, 3, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. You don't know. Everyone's going to have a slightly different rotation. Your servers do move with you. So no matter what your dining room is, through these rotational dining rooms, you'll have the same servers, which is nice because they get to know you and your preferences. And like, for instance, one of my preferences is that I like to order a bottle of wine to share at dinner, and I want the bottle of wine to be determined based on what I order for my entree. And so, the servers just usually get to know that. They're like, okay, what's your entree? Here's the wine we would suggest with that. And they kind of bring it out. But it could be more important than that in terms of food allergies and things like that. So they are there to know your preferences at these rotational dining rooms. There are also quick service locations, and these are often located near the pool. And these vary a little bit across the ships, but it's just windows that you walk up to and say, I'd like a burger, please give me some fries, or a sandwich and some fresh fruit. And usually they're near the pool deck area. There's also usually on the ships one or two adult exclusive restaurants, and these are restaurants like Palo and Remy's, and these do cost extra. The other things I've mentioned so far do not cost extra. They are included in your cruise fare. But the adult exclusive restaurants do cost a little bit extra, although not as much as you might think. I think they are one of the best deals because the level of service and food quality is so high. And at the end, you might get like a $50 bill per person, which isn't that bad considering the amount of food that you get. So there is that. Those do require reservations and they do cost extra, but they are available. There is also room service. Room service is included with your Disney cruise fare, and there's nothing better to me than ordering cookies and milk to end the night because I'm like a toddler in a grown-up body. But some things are gonna cost a little bit of money on the menu, but most things are included, and you can do that anytime. For breakfast specifically, you can fill out a menu the night before and hang it on the door, and then on that form, you can say when you want breakfast brought to you, and it will be automatically brought to you in the morning. For most people, that's just going to be continental breakfast. And if you want to get hot breakfast, you'll have to go out and get that at one of the restaurants. But that is an option, and that is included. In addition to all the things that I've listed, there's also just a lot of like miscellaneous spots like lounges and coffee spots, a pub, etc. Most of those are going to be additional costs, but they are available. On my last cruise, I decided there was one dining room where all the tables were really squished together really tight, and I decided I didn't really want to go back there because I think we were assigned to that same dining room 3 times. And so one of those times I just skipped it and went to the pub and paid like $10 to eat something there and order a beer. And so that was another option. But there's lots of different choices and lots of food during a Disney cruise. The next step in Disney cruise planning is to make sure you know your dates because these are going to be different than you're used to at Disney World. The first thing to know is about booking your cruise. And the further in advance you book, usually the cheaper it is. And that's because the pricing is dynamic based on how full the ship is. So to get the lowest price, you're going to want to book far in advance, at least like 15 to 18 months if you can, and get that on the books and lock in your rate. After that, you're going to want to make sure that you pay your full balance in advance. And this has to be done before it is time to book activities. So make sure you do it far enough in advance for your activities. And you might say, then when can I book my activities? And that depends on how many cruises you've been on before. So if you're a first-time cruiser, that's going to be 75 days before sailing. And if it's not your first cruise, it's going to be more than 75 days, but it depends on how many cruises you've been on. And this is when you book most activities like mixology, like excursions, beauty by boutique, all these sort of things. This also includes eating at one of those signature restaurants that I mentioned, like Palo and Remy's. Availability is limited, so that's why it's a huge perk to have been on, many Disney cruises. But first-time cruisers will still have plenty of things that they can book. Another thing to know is online check-in. This is where you upload your passport and you get your actual port arrival time. And again, this does depend on how many cruises you've been on. If it's your first cruise, it'll be 30 days before you cruise. If it's not your first cruise, it'll be more than 30 days. And the last thing to know is about booking the Royal Gathering. The Royal Gathering is the atrium being filled with princesses. I think it's usually 4 princesses. It doesn't cost anything, but you do have to have a reservation to do it. So basically, if you have a reservation, you show up at that time, and it allows you to go through the line of princesses and meet a bunch all in a row. This is very popular, and it is confusing that it is 30 days before your cruise and not at your activity booking window. It is also a multitasking. If you're a first-time cruiser, you'll be doing online check-in and booking Royal Gathering at the same time. But those dates are important to know before these windows open up so that you are ready for them. And the last step in our Disney World planning process and Disney Cruise Line process is to add extra magic, whatever that means. So for Disney World, that could mean booking special tours. It could mean creating a countdown. But for Disney Cruise, there's actually a few different opportunities. I feel like this is one of the areas that really makes DCL stick out. So the first is that you could bring special outfits to wear for themed nights. So I mentioned that there's pirate night or sometimes there's a Frozen night. And so just kind of getting into the spirit of it is fun. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to, but it's fun because lots of people do. Another is that you can decorate your door. So I will say in my early cruises, I didn't know that this was going to be a thing or such a popular thing. And now I don't ever miss it because I really felt left out. But if you bring your own magnets or lights or something that you can put on your door, then that can just help you feel like you're in the spirit of it. I just have a bag full of magnets that I throw in every time I'm packing for a cruise because it's fun. I have some magnetic hooks and lights that are battery operated, and I just kind of hang the lights from the hooks, but also magnets. And sometimes I bring a magnet that's a dry erase magnet with a dry erase marker that is also magnetic, and so people can leave messages. Another thing that is very popular on Disney cruises is fish extenders. You may have heard this term. The term comes from the fact that there are fish hooks, decorative fish hooks on the outside of the Disney cruise staterooms, and people will hang things from those that have pouches in them, and then they will very often exchange gifts, kind of like stocking stuffers. It's like a gift exchange program. And this is usually done in the Facebook group for your cruise. And so you just sign up for a fish extender and you agree to bring gifts that you can deposit to certain staterooms. And then they do the same for you. I will say if it was my first cruise, I would probably skip the fish extender because it really adds a whole layer of planning and adds a lot of contents to your luggage depending on what you're bringing. And you have to have time during your cruise to actually go and take them around to all the staterooms. And I just found it to be a little bit more than I was interested in our first cruise, especially if it's a shorter cruise, because you're literally dedicating, um, a couple of hours sometimes to a cruise that you've paid for when there's a lot of other things to do. So I would personally skip the fish extenders. It was my first time, but I would definitely decorate the door and bring outfits for the themed nights because it's just extra fun. A couple other extra magic kind of ideas is that you can purchase onboard gifts. So before your cruise in the DCL app or website, you can purchase onboard gifts. And these are things that you pre-purchase and they're in your room when you get there. So they can be decorative, like I want a birthday package and it includes decorations that will be there when you get to your room. It can also mean merchandise that is only available through this method. We moved to Mexico last year and only brought 9 tubs of things. And one of the things I brought was something I had gotten on an onboard gift. Let me show you. This is a Bluetooth speaker that we got, and it's only available through the onboard gift purchase process. And it was in the room we got there, and we just turned it on and used it to play music throughout the trip. It's so cute. It floats in the pool, but it also comes with a stand. So if you don't want to float it in a pool, you can put it on the stand, and that's where it is right now. It's in the office on a stand in here. Super cute, but things like that are available through the onboard gift process. And also Disney just added the ability to allow other people to buy you onboard gifts, kind of like a registry. You can send people your own custom link that is available in your DCL account, and they can contribute to your onboard fund. So that's a fun idea. And the last idea I wanted to share is that you can get a free call from a character. So pre-recorded phone calls from Disney characters that wish you well on your cruise is a fun way to get your whole travel group excited. And this is available after you book your cruise, and you're in the My Disney Cruise section of the website, and you can select request a call from a character. And this will take you to a site where you can choose the character, enter your phone number, schedule a time, and provide additional information if you would like. So that can be just kind of a fun thing to get people excited.
Requested. The entire Disney Cruise Line crew is thrilled that you have decided to sail with us. And there's someone else who'd like to say hello to you too. Just press 1 and I'll connect you.
That's the 6 steps for the planning process. If you want to learn more, I do have a podcast where I interview people about their trips, including Disney cruise trips. Some of them are land and sea, some of them are cruise only, but it can be helpful to hear it in action, hear how things actually go, and figure out how you want to do it for your own trip. I think that is gonna be it for this video. Hopefully, that is helpful if you're just kinda getting started, but if you have more questions, and there's a very good chance that you will, please feel free to leave those in the comments, and thanks for watching.